All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to break down one of the most powerful and maybe one of the most dangerous tools of influence out there, Law 32. It's all about tapping into the incredible power of human fantasy.
And right off the bat, the book hits us with this pretty stark judgment. What this is really saying is that people don't just prefer a nice story over a hard truth. No, it's much deeper than that. They will actively, almost desperately, seek out anyone who can spin a good yarn, who can conjure up a fantasy, especially when things get tough.
So it's not just about, telling a few lies. It's about tapping into something really fundamental, that deep human need for an escape, for a glimmer of hope. And if you can position yourself as the person who provides that escape, well, you become a beacon in a pretty bleak landscape. And that, right there, is where the real power lies.
Now, to really get a feel for how this works, we've got a fantastic historical example. It's the almost unbelievable story of the alchemist of Venice.
So you gotta picture this. It's the late 16th century. For hundreds of years, Venice was the place to be, a glittering center of wealth and power. But now, it's all fading. The money's drying up, banks are failing, there's just this gloom hanging over the entire city. They were humiliated, they were depressed, and more than anything, they were desperate for a miracle. It was the perfect storm, really, just fertile ground for a truly grand fantasy to take hold.
So how does this all play out? Well, into this scene walks a guy calling himself Bragadino, and the city just latches onto him. Now, his method is absolutely fascinating, because he literally does nothing. For months, he's living like a king, all on the city's dime, producing zero results. And the craziest part? The longer he waits, the more famous he gets, the more people want to believe in him. When they finally start putting the pressure on, he doesn't show them any gold. Nope. He just makes an even bigger promise, and then skips town.
And we're not talking about some small improvement here. He promised to multiply the city's gold 30-fold. 30! I mean, think about that. That's Law 32 in a nutshell. Nobody wants to hear about the slow, painful grind of hard work and gradual change. That's a tough sell. But a massive pot of gold, appearing almost like magic, now that gets people's attention. It's just infinitely more appealing.
Okay, so why on earth did this work so well? Let's break down the psychology behind it, because these are really the keys to unlocking people's imaginations. Here's the absolute core of it. A powerful fantasy needs a bleak reality to push against. It's like lighting a match in a dark room. It just shines so much brighter. For Venice, their reality was this slow, painful decline. Bragadino came along and offered the exact opposite, a sudden, brilliant, golden recovery. And that vision was so intoxicating, it basically blinded everyone to what should have been a really obvious con.
So the first key fantasy is this promise of a shortcut, right? The get-rich-quick scheme. Reality teaches us that any real change takes forever, it's hard work, it's a grind, but the fantasy, the one Bragadino sold so well, is that you can skip all that. You can go from poor to rich, from sick to healthy, boom, just like that, in one magical moment.
The next key is the pull of the exotic, the unknown. I mean, let's be honest, everyday life can get pretty boring. It's repetitive, it's predictable. So this fantasy is like an escape hatch. It's a doorway into a completely new world, a place with different rules, new adventures, something totally different from the 9 to 5.
And the third one, this one is a biggie. It's the fantasy of unity. Look around. Society often feels so fragmented, so full of conflict. But a really powerful dream, a shared goal, it can bring people together. It creates this almost mystical sense of us, a shared purpose. And you see this used all the time by leaders trying to rally people, often by pointing to a common enemy.
Now, Bragadino was good, but he was far from the only person to master this stuff. Let's run through a few other historical figures who use this law with, honestly, surgical precision.
And just look at the variety here, it's incredible. You've got George Salmanazar, who literally invented an entire culture just to sell London on the fantasy of the exotic. You've got Mata Hari, who used the fantasy of being this unknowable, mysterious woman to gain power. Oscar Hartzell created a fantasy of unity for people named Drake, promising them a lost fortune. And Han van Meegeren, he played on the art world's fantasy of finding lost masterpieces. See the pattern? Each one found a deep collective desire and then just filled it with a story.
The legendary con man, Joseph the Yellow Kid Weil, he summed it up perfectly. He said he found it far more interesting and profitable to romance than to tell the truth. And that's it, isn't it? The truth can be blunt, it can be boring. But a fantasy, a story, that's something people can get excited about. And as he points out, it's usually a lot more profitable too.
But of course, with this much power, there's always a catch. There's a massive, massive danger that comes with it. So, what happens when the dream finally comes crashing down?
This right here, this is the turning point. You can keep a fantasy going for a surprisingly long time, but sooner or later, reality is going to come knocking. So the big question is, what happens when people wake up and start demanding to see the results?
Well, let's go back to our friend Bragadino. When he fled Venice and took his act to Munich, the game completely changed. His old tricks just didn't work. The people there were described as more sober-minded. They weren't willing to just live in the fantasy forever. They didn't want more promises. They wanted to see the gold.
And the result? It was brutal. And it was fast. He couldn't deliver the miracle he promised. His great fantasy ended right there, swinging from the gallows in 1592. The dream collapsed into the absolute harshest reality you can imagine. And this is what we call the reversal of the law. There is absolutely immense power in playing to people's fantasies. But it becomes a trap, a very dangerous one, the second you're expected to actually produce something tangible. And the bigger and more beautiful the dream you sell, the harder and uglier the fall is going to be when everyone realizes it's empty.
And this last quote just perfectly captures the essence of it all. The real power isn't in the destination, it's in the journey. It's the distant mirage that's always changing, always just out of reach, always making you dream. Because the second you can actually grab a hold of the fantasy, test it, and find out it's not real, poof, all the power just vanishes. Which kind of leaves you with a question, right? In our world today, a world that's just drowning in information and facts, does our need for these fantasies get stronger, or does it fade away?